Hey guys, and we're back. As you probably already guessed, with all my reviews from the past, I'm a huge platformer fan, so I thought maybe today I would mix it up. I decided to visit a genre that I'm not familiar with at all. I was going to do something based in sports. I'm not a sports fan in any way whatsoever, but the cover art in this game got me very interested in trying it out. Today's review is on Arch Rivals. Launch title. So let me be upfront before I start this review. I'm not a sports fan at all. I'm not saying anything bad about those of you who are. It's just not my cup of tea. When I decided to play this game, I wasn't going in just as a first-time gamer, but I was going in as a first-time sports person. So when I picked up Arch Rivals, not only was it a game that I had never played, but it was in a sport that I wasn't very familiar with.
Arch Rivals was a basketball game that was released by Midway in 1989. It was originally an arcade game. So if you wanted to play it, you had to go out and find an arcade with the cabinet in it, then you had to cough up your quarters just to be able to play. So publishers knew the next logical step was to release it at home. So we ended up with 3 versions: the Sega Genesis version, the Game Gear version, and the one I'm playing, the NES version.
My first exposure to this game was the NES version. I had never heard of it before, but I was drawn because of the cartoony artwork in the front of the cartridge. It looked like it was a very loose representation of basketball, and I figured it was a good way for me to start with something that I wasn't very familiar with. I have to say, I was really impressed by the visuals. The sprites are absolutely huge, and I love the fact that the audience in the background actually moves. It's a very detailed game. Especially when you're speaking about sports on the NES, they all tend to be very minimalistic, at least for the ones that I've seen. This one, on the other hand, is extremely well done. It looks very cartoony, and it brings everything to life.
Since we're talking about graphics, I should probably compare the differences in all of the games. The original version of the game was extremely beautiful. The characters were huge and had so much detail. They even had shadows on their clothing, and their animations were so smooth. The colors were bright and vibrant, making the game great to look at all times. The Genesis version wasn't far behind. Obviously, it was a 16-bit system, so it could keep up with the arcade half decently. It was detailed, and it also had great colors and animations. The weakest of the 3 was clearly the NES version. The colors weren't as vibrant, and the characters were nowhere near as detailed. But, that being said, the NES was no slouch when it came to this game. It was able to hold its own, and it still looked good doing it.
If you've seen my other reviews in the past, you probably know I'm a huge fan of NES music. Almost every game that I reviewed, I've said the music is great. But this is the first time that I actually have to say the music wasn't that good. The songs in this game, songs is being way too generous. The song in this game is repetitive. It's very, very basic, and all it is a bass line with a bit of a drum. It gets very, very boring, very, very fast.
But after all is said and done, it is a sports game, so I'm pretty sure that music wasn't the most important aspect in the developer's minds. I'll admit though, I do enjoy having a good tune to pump me up or make me bob my head, and this game's tune was really basic, so it kind of just sits in the background. Take a listen. I wasn't a huge fan of the actual song, but when I compared it to the arcade version, I have to admit I was very impressed with the representation on the NES. I was also pretty surprised when I heard the Genesis version. A lot of people like Sega's sound chip because it has a very specific style, but I have to be honest, I was definitely not a fan of Sega's rendition of the already bare tune.
I think my biggest issue with this game is the repetitiveness. Every time you score a basket, the music restarts. And this is basketball after all, so you're scoring a lot of baskets every few seconds. So that means every few seconds, the song is restarting. After a long time of playing this game, I was so surprised to realize there was more to the music than just the bass line. I spent 2 hours with this game, and in those 2 hours, I might have heard the main part of the song maybe 4 or 5 times. By the end of it, my nerves were raw from hearing that repetition. Dun, ch, dun, 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 ch. Dun, ch, dun, 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 ch. Dun, ch, dun, dun, dun. You'd have no idea. Oh my god.
The gameplay. This game is as minimalist as they come. The main menu doesn't give you any kind of a roster of teams or locations. It literally starts with a title screen, then just shows you two random teams that are going to play each other. You can press a button and it'll randomly select two different teams, but that's a bit of a bummer. Once you're assigned your randomly generated team, you do get to pick a character that you want to play as. They all have a small blurb about them, which is pretty cool, although it doesn't tell me anything as to how they play differently from each other. Crowd pleaser? What does that mean? And how does it affect my game? All American? What? The sad part is, they all play exactly the same, at least in my opinion.
When I started playing this game, I was getting my butt handed to me like you wouldn't imagine. It got really frustrating because I had no idea what I was doing. For every one shot that I got in the net, the AI was getting 2 or 3. I was getting overwhelmed and I couldn't find any way to make the game fair. I started to think that it was kind of like it is in the arcade, where they make the game unnecessarily hard so they can get more of your quarters. But eventually, I got the hang of it. Once I started learning what I was supposed to do, things got a bit more fair. And in typical NES fashion, once you learn the pattern, it was really easy. At one point, I was more than double the points that the other guys had. And we're talking, 43 to over 100 on my end.
I think my favorite part of the game was seeing the little animations between the baskets and between the periods. I thought they were creative and it really made the game become more immersive. It felt like it had some soul and it brought some life to the rather repetitive nature of basketball.
So I'm sure through all this review, you've been asking yourself, why does this game look so familiar? Why have I seen this before, but it's not exactly this? I swear to God I know this game, but it looks different somehow. And you'd be right. If this game looks familiar, it's because it is. This game was actually the precursor to one of the biggest sports games in the 90s.
From its humble beginnings as arch rivals, the developers were able to mold it, tweak it, and change it to turn it into one of the most addictive, competitive, and accessible sports games, NBA Jam. You didn't even have to like sports to like NBA Jam. The comparisons are easy to make. The large cartoony characters, the unrealistic rules, the fun competition between friends. This is what made Arch Rivals good, and NBA Jam amazing. After I found that out, I was able to enjoy Arch Rivals so much more.
So what are my final thoughts? Let me start off by saying it was very easy for me to go hard on this game. After all, it is a sports game, and the music drove me absolutely nuts. It doesn't help that there were no real instructions, so I had no idea what I was doing when I started. But after digging for a while, I was able to find a gem, even though it was a very small gem. Would I suggest this game to other players? That's a tough question to answer. For the average player, probably not, because this game is very rough. Who I would suggest it to are people who like sports games, people who are collecting, and for people who are curious about the history of NBA Jam. With that game being so big, it is really interesting to see where it came from. I am glad I own it because I do like having a little piece of history with me. Would I play it again? Probably not for a long time. I might check it out on a live stream or something along those lines, but it's not really something that I enjoyed enough to want to come back and play it. It's an interesting game, and it's a cool piece of history. But after all, it is a sports game, and that's not my cup of tea. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you join me in my next live stream and my next review. So, until next time.